question straight away from Raji, and you can guess why this one came in. What are your views on Carlo Ancelotti moving to Brazil?
I think it's something that needed to happen. I think not just for world football, because of course the idea of Ancelotti at the World Cup leading Brazil is a pretty exciting one. But also from Real Madrid's perspective, because they needed to move on. Ancelotti's perspective, because he deserves an exciting job to take on next. And I think a lot of what's gone wrong at Real Madrid this season, you can't completely divorce it from him, but a lot of it's not been his fault. Obviously, there are things he could have handled better, like the whole rotating penalty taker thing is still baffling to me, just because I feel that Ancelotti's greatest strength above all is managing to minimise drama, whereas that policy sort of maximised drama, particularly in the early days of Mbappe. But I think who it's really good for is Vinícius Júnior, because we've spoken so long about the closeness, the beyond good coach-player relationship between Ancelotti and Vini Júnior. You know, Ancelotti's been there for him at some awful moments, really. He's stood up for him in a way that, let's be honest, most coaches in La Liga wouldn't have done, because I think when it comes to dealing with racism, Spanish football has been extremely clumsy in the past, and Ancelotti's shown all of his, I think, humanity and his worldliness in helping Vinícius and helping him to deal with it as best as possible, although Vinícius has been extraordinary in the way he's dealt with it himself. And that matters to him, unsurprisingly so. So if we're talking about being past the best of Neymar, which I don't think is unreasonable to do, and it's going to be Vini Junior's team going forward, it's really important for him to have someone there who he absolutely believes in and trusts.
Yeah, Vinny loves him, Lars. Vinny absolutely loves the bloke. So that's one major component, I suppose, of the Brazil national team going to the World Cup that is sorted. What do you think of him going there in all other respects?
I kind of like this, and I'm often a little bit skeptical of big name managers from the club game making the transition to the international scene, because the nature of the job is so different. And more, I mean, there was upon a time where the manager would not even take training every day and would spend half his life on the golf course and just have coaches who did a lot of stuff. But that's not this young generation of the Pep Guardiolas of the world. Like, they're obsessives who kick every ball in training, are across every stat, do everything, just total workaholics, a lot of them. And I don't think they necessarily transition well into the international game, because it's very stop-start. You know, you have the players for a very intensive period, and then you don't see them again for a while, and your whole work-life balance becomes different. I think Carlo Ancelotti is a guy who will thrive with that. I think he is a man who has a life outside of football. I think he is someone who doesn't necessarily need to. I mean, I'm sure he has intensity and motivation, and, you know, surviving for several years at Real Madrid is not a small thing. But I think he is someone who could suit that lifestyle. I also think a challenge that club coaches often have when they go into the international scene is that the fact they don't have a ton of time with the players becomes a problem for them. If they have these very intricate systems that they want to put in place and their philosophies, it's a hard thing to do in an international team. Whereas Ancelotti, of course, is an arch pragmatist. He's a guy who looks at the pieces I have, and then he puts the puzzle together in the best way he can. And I think that's perfectly suited for the international job. And thirdly, we mentioned it on the main show, Hansi Flick has had this, I think, advantage of coming from the outside, of not being too caught up in all the drama and stuff at Barcelona. I think this could be similar. I mean, the Brazil managing job is... Can we say it's the biggest and most high pressure job in the world in Brazil? Like, it must be the most, because you've got an absolutely football mad nation that demands you not just to win everything, but to win everything in style. You know, the demands are impossible. But I think being an outsider who doesn't have all of that, and who can just step in and do the best job he can, and then can kind of leave and exist outside of that psychodrama of managing Brazil, I think that can be good. So I quite like this.
Yeah, Andy, he's not moving to Brazil, as the question asks. Lock, stock and barrel, is he? I understand that he's come to some accord with the Brazilian FA, but he wants to do at least part of the job remotely. To what extent is that even possible?
I think it's possible because so many Brazilian players play in Europe, but look, the optics of it are not good. I don't think you can get past that. And I think you've seen previous coaches who infamously have done the job remotely. And you think of Gus Hiddink with Turkey. You think of Jurgen Klinsmann with South Korea. It's just not a good foot to get off on. I guess like Ancelotti is the sort of person who he's not going to be skiving off. He's putting in time with players and clubs, and maybe he would argue it's easier to do that in Europe. But I think particularly in Brazil, where sometimes there's such a divide between those who believe that European influence should be limited. Of course, he's the first non-Brazilian coach to take the national team. There was a lot of resistance to Jorge Jesus when he came in at Flamengo. Of course, he was one of the other candidates for the job. I think a couple of bad results, and it will be used as a stick to beat him with. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Raji, great question, and thanks for that. Sam on Instagram wants to know, after their 1-0 win against Las Palmas on Tuesday night, have Sevilla managed to calm tensions with their ultras?
So I guess in terms of on pitch, it really reached the breaking point of the weekend. So Sevilla went away to Celta Vigo. They lost 3-2, which you may think, okay, normal, because Celta are a lot better than Sevilla this season. But Celta played over half the game with 10 men, and they still managed to win with something to spare in the end. The fans were so annoyed, or a hardcore of the fans were so annoyed when Sevilla flew back from Vigo that when they landed, they were allowed, the squad, to use a rarely used side entrance to the airport to get away without the fans who were waiting with them knowing. But then they got back to the training ground to get their cars and stuff, and there were 500 ultras with flares tearing the gate off the front of the training ground, and it was deemed not safe enough by the local police for Sevilla's players to leave, so they had to sleep at the training ground. Now, look, whatever the upset and whatever those fans have been through, you can't condone that level of violence. No one should have to put up with that. But I think what is clear, and what was clear from the build-up to this game against Las Palmas, is everyone, players, directors, fans, were aware of how big this game with Las Palmas was, because Las Palmas have won 2 games this calendar year. Their best player, Fabio Silva, who's on loan from Wolves, is unavailable and probably going to be unavailable for the whole rest of the season. And if Sevilla had lost this, A, they would have been slap bang in the middle of relegation trouble, and B, you just can't be losing to Las Palmas at home. And the fact that they had to win their first game in over 2 months by really edging their way through this, and by the end of the game, everyone was helping them time waste. They were doing that thing that they used to do when they were good, and they were beating teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid, and all the ball boys were throwing balls on the pitch at the same time. This is how incredibly desperate they were. You saw Joaquin Caparrós, who's come back for a full spell in charge at the club. The players who are injured and suspended, everyone on the bench celebrating like mad, just because this win makes it almost certain that they're going to stay up with 2 games to go. And in terms of calming tensions with the ultras, you might have thought the ultras would react quite badly to that, but actually the banners that they had up, the Bidis Norte behind the goal, were saying, look, this is ours is a love for this club that will never die. So it's like we're putting to one side just for this one game the fact that we hate the president, that we hate the board, that we hate the sporting director, that we're annoyed with the players. All of these things were put into one side because we have to win this game. Otherwise, we're in serious danger of relegation. Now that's over. Now that's past. They're going to go back to chipping away. They were annoyed at the players at the weekend, but really the main beef that the fans have is with the club. And that's not going to change. You know, you've got Jose Maria Del Nido Jr., or just Junior as he's known, the president who's protested against all the time, who's the previous president. His dad is trying to get him to leave the club, and he feels that he should be on it. They're in financial chaos. They've got basically no money to spend next season. They've got a sporting director in Victor Orta who's extremely unpopular, and they've got nothing to sell, despite what Orta might say. So, look, unless something massive changes, they are going to be struggling even worse this season because they're not going to have the teams behind them struggling to stay up. I think the teams that, and it is a very close promotion race in the Segunda, the teams that come up, be it Elche, Levante, I suspect will do a lot better than Bayer Leverkusen and Las Palmas in particular have this season. So, look, it's a truce rather than a solution to the many problems that there are at the club.
What a story. And thanks, Sam, on Instagram for giving us an opportunity to talk about it. Ask OTC, indeed. James on Instagram asks, with Barcelona still seemingly light in defence, who do you think could be a realistic option at centre-back to partner Pau Cubarsí? Lars?
Yeah, maybe a little bit light. Martinez is kind of old, and Inigo Martinez is kind of old. They have Araujo, who I quite like. I do think an Araujo-Pau Cubarsí partnership would be good, but yeah, you need options. I like that. I did something. This is very basic, but I did something that I think is kind of funny with this question. I went to the magnificent fbref.com website. It's a very sort of deep, nerdy, statistical type of thing. They have a feature where you could look at a player's statistical profile, and they pick up like similar players who has similar numbers to this guy. So I looked at who has similar numbers to Pau Cubarsí as a sort of passing, like a centre half who passes an awful lot and solves a lot of issues for you. You know who looks like him the most? It's Mickey van de Ven, according to the stats. Now, of course, Spurs are already bracing themselves for a bit of a campaign from Atletico Madrid to try to sign Christian Romero. Maybe Van de Ven, and it would make total sense with the sort of incredibly high line that Hansi Flick deploys, you know, having the speed of Van de Ven. I just don't think they have the money. I think if there's a chance Spurs are going to have to let Romero go, the price tag they're going to put on Van de Ven is going to be, you know, whatever number that is going to be a number Barcelona don't have. But also, intriguingly, down on the list, Akanji City, not buying him. Inigo Martinez, already at Barcelona. Daley Blind, kind of old. But Marquinhos is a very similar fit to Cubarsí, and okay, he's not young, he's 31, but maybe there's a Marquinhos to Barcelona type of thing. Maybe that could be something.
Look, I would never criticise you, Lars. You know I love you, but I have to say there is inherent hypocrisy in tearing into Barcelona for all their bad financial decisions and then coming on this podcast and encouraging them to make more bad financial decisions.
But I'm not saying it's not funny. Listen, just sell another part of the ground to unnamed investors from the Middle East and bring in a 31-year-old centre half. It's what you want to do deep down, Laporta. You know it.
Look, we're having another party next season. You're all invited, listeners. Lars is buying the snacks and drinks already. That's what's happening here. He's stocking up. But I would say the one thing, if we were encouraging them to be sensible for a second,
you're no fun.
I know, right? If you've got no money, shop in Poundland. And we were talking before about Sevilla. Now, one player from Sevilla who I do think has got really good value, but who they won't be able to ask a lot for, Loic Bade. Terrific player, and that they've been to Sevilla and shopped effectively before, obviously with Jules Koundé. Bade was really close to going to Aston Villa in January. I think he's someone who knows La Liga. He's improved enormously since he's played there. He's continued to look like a good defender in a not very good team. He's fast. He doesn't give the ball away. He's aggressive. I think he would be a really, really handy foil for Cubarsí, because the thing is, I think maybe what James is getting at in this question, I think it's important not just that they reinforce, but they have someone when Inigo's not there to help Pau Cubarsí, because essentially he's still learning. And learning in that Hansi Flick system, he's still only 18, is a little bit like learning to drive in London. There's a lot happening at the same time. And, I think he needs a little bit more help and guidance. You see him make mistakes, and of course, every defender makes mistakes, but sometimes it feels like it's a consequence of everything that's going on around him. The other thing we have to say is, going back to what Lars was on before, Barcelona are Barcelona. When Deco was asked about transfers a couple of days ago, he said, well, what we really need is cover for Rafinha and Lamine Yamal so we don't overplay them. And it would be the most Barcelona thing ever to not go out and buy a defender and go and buy another couple of attackers, wouldn't it?
Well, actually, what I think, this kind of flies against your very reasonable suggestion that you need someone a little bit experienced to help Cubarsí. I get that. But also, what I suspect might be the answer is they will just find some guy from La Masia that no one outside of Catalonia had ever heard about who turns out to be amazing. Because this apparently is what's happening now. I kind of wanted to mention it in the main show about Barcelona. It is absolutely remarkable that they've had yet another generation come through. A friend of mine, Tor Christian Carlsen, who's has been the sporting director at Monaco, has been a scout for Leverkusen. He's worked in some pretty cool clubs. He does an annual sort of list for ESPN of the top 39 players in the world aged 21 or younger. This season's list, 6 out of the top 20 are Barcelona guys. It's like over a quarter of the top 20 talents in the world aged under 21 are Barcelona kids. And it's just completely insane. I'm not a Barcelona guy. I think they over-egg the sort of, you need them more than a club, all this sort of stuff. All this stuff gets on my nerves sometimes. But what they do at La Masia, every single generation, they get like half an 11 of players who can play at the very highest level. And there's nothing like it on the planet in terms of academies. So if they're really short for centre halves next year, I swear to God, they'll just find some 18-year-olds who is somehow amazing, because that seems to be what they do all the time. And I don't know how they do it, but that is genuinely just off the wall crazy.
I know we were talking Spain, but I think the driving analogy would have been better suited to Paris, because I don't know if you're aware, but learner drivers aren't allowed to drive around the Arc de Triomphe because, traffic is coming from all directions and they can't.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Well, there you go.
7 lanes, but where are the lanes?
Indeed. It's fun. SK and Dan have both asked us about Sampdoria after they were relegated from Serie B last night. The question is, where does the club go from here? It's remarkable, though, isn't it? I would have thought, Andy, that Sampdoria, once upon a time, one of the big teams in Serie A, have been relegated, to the 3rd tier now?
Yeah, so European Cup finalist, of course, from 1992. So at Wembley, when Barcelona won their first ever European Cup. So it is like Forest or Leeds going down to the 3rd tier. It's really sad, and this has been coming for a number of weeks/months. I think it puts into perspective how tough it was for Andrea Pirlo, where he was really slated for the job he did there, and actually it wasn't all down to him. It's been really, really difficult. That what they did a couple of months ago, they as the guys who were coming in put it, they were making good on the dream of the late Gianluca Vialli, of course, former Sampdoria player himself, and getting the band back together. So Alberico Ivani came in as coach, assisted by Attilio Lombardo. Roberto Mancini added his help to it. But it just didn't seem like a very practical solution. And if you look at the squad they've got, and there are still some really good players in there, like Remy Udon and Bagnon, who's experienced in Italy. He's there as well. There's no way they should be in this position. But of course, if there's constant instability, if there's constant turnover, the worst can happen. I think we've seen it elsewhere in Serie B this season, where there's stability. And you look at Sassuolo, who've come straight back up, for example. A lot of it is because, and obviously it's a thing that they've got a pretty good budget by Italian standards, they managed to hold on to most of their players. So, Arno Loriente, who's great last season and was the player of the season in Serie B this season, they managed to keep him. Obviously, Berardi was injured, so that's why they couldn't transfer him, but Christian Torsvet stayed, for example. They had loads of good players there. And just changing everything and saying every 10 minutes, right, okay, we need a restart. You've got to give a chance for the last plan to work. You can't change your mind every 5 minutes. So look, they just need to take a deep breath with a bit of stability, and with the size of club they are, they should be straight back up. But I'm yet to be convinced that they can hold their nerve to be able to do that.
And it's interesting. It feels like I feel like this is part of a trend that we're seeing in football. Like, we've always seen the odd big team get relegated, but we've had a couple of years. I mean, they got promoted now, but Hamburg got back up from the Zweite Bundesliga. We've had several years with like Hertha, Schalke, and Hamburg knocking about in the second tier in Germany. There used to be a time where if your attendance figures were at a certain level, then that brought you in so much money that things would eventually be fine on the pitch. But it seems like the smaller, smarter, and more efficient clubs are winning ahead. Because again, it's weird. A team getting demoted from Serie B with an average attendance of 23,000. If you're bringing in 23,000 people a week, you should be able to find enough money to spend your way out of at least not getting relegated from Serie B. But then you look into Serie C, like Catania are still down there, like after being demoted for having various troubles about 10 years ago. Catania were averaging 16,000 a week in Serie C last season. So like having a big support and being a team with some kind of history and pedigree doesn't guarantee you anything anymore. Like you still need to be smarter than a lot of your opponents on the field. And this, with Sampdoria going through, I think, 4 coaches this year, clearly they have not been the smart people in the room there.
Staying with Italian football, though, Tim on Instagram asks, and I don't know if this has been signed, sealed or delivered yet, but nevertheless, with Cesc Fàbregas likely to be staying at Como for next season, would now have been a good time for him to leave, or is he making the right decision by staying at the club? And I suppose, Andy, we should say if he stays at the club.
Yeah, exactly, Dotun, because at the time of recording, it's being strongly suggested in Italy by multiple reports that he's going to decide against going to Bayer Leverkusen, and Como don't want him to go, obviously. And he's going to stay at Como next season. Now, Leverkusen and Leipzig, it seems the talk in Germany is that they don't think it's finished. Leverkusen presumably would have a bit of an advance on Leipzig because they've got Champions League for a start, which RB Leipzig don't. And because they had very productive talks with Cesc Fàbregas going back a couple of weeks. And going into this week, it seemed that there are only 2 possible decisions for Fàbregas: go to Leverkusen or stay at Como. If he has decided to stay at Como, I think he's done completely the right thing. Because, firstly, I think he's still got a lot to learn. He's done well this season. Obviously, he's only officially been the name over the door this season. And, they've done pretty well. It's clear that he's got a magnetism to the younger players who want to come to the club. So you look at Diao, Kakare. He's worked brilliantly with Nico Paz, although whether Nico Paz is going to continue to be there next season is a question. And he's very convincing when he's describing his ideas, as he was on Italian TV the other day. He was on Sky Sport Italia describing his tactics, and he's so erudite, it's unbelievable. But of course, because we see him talking like that, we were talking about that with Hansi Flick, weren't we, in main OTC this week? We sometimes think the coaches who want to describe in great depth what they do, we think are the geniuses. And the ones who don't, we just think, they just happened to be there while some success was happening, which is not true, is it? The fact is, Fàbregas is a young coach, a developing coach, and the other half of it is who really would want to follow on from Xabi Alonso? Quite apart from the fact that they've got quite different philosophies. Like on the half of Fàbregas is a little bit more defensive. He acknowledges he likes to sit a little deeper, even though they like to control possession. But following up from Alonso, Lars, it's just impossible. How can any coach improve on what he's done at Leverkusen?
Yeah, and of course, Andy, as someone who does a number of podcasts, I'm a big believer in the idea that talking a good game about something does not automatically make you very, very qualified at anything in life or anything. But on a serious note, a bit of a Frank Lampard turn there. I'm a big believer in like getting some experience is not a bad thing. I think Xabi Alonso was very wise to take an extra season at Leverkusen before jumping ship to one of the biggest clubs in the world. I think he will have learned a lot more from this extra year at Leverkusen than he learned from the year when they kept winning all the time. And it just seems like Cesc Fàbregas is in this perfect place, like because there's real investment gone into Como. Like that's a decent squad. They've got some proper players there. He must have just total respect and confidence and admiration by everyone involved with that club. And what a place to live and ply your trade as you're learning your way in the game. And the advantage you have, if he's a smaller name, if he's someone who's never been a player, if he's like a former gym teacher who's gotten a good job and is doing a good job, and suddenly you're in a position where you can sign a big contract with a big club, okay, maybe you feel like you have to take that chance because you might do badly next year, and then no one will ask you again because you're a guy who used to be a gym teacher. Cesc Fàbregas has the advantage of he will always be Cesc Fàbregas, right? And he's kind of showed now that he can do a job and he can speak well. And even if things go badly for Coleman next season, he'll still be a very attractive name. He doesn't necessarily need to take a big job for the money. He should be fine in that regard. So I think just hang around by Lake Como and coach your team and have a great time until something that feels right comes along.
Yeah, just hang around, Cesc. You heard what Lars said. And by the way, gentlemen, it's now time for our Game of the Week, brought to you by FotMob. Each week, our experts recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend. And just as importantly, they also suggest the food that we should be having with it. So, Andy, do you want to kick off first? What would you recommend? Match-wise, first of all, but then, of course, food-wise.
We're going to the Netherlands for the final game of the season, Ajax versus Twente. Now, look, we were just saying how the very unaesthetically pleasing Ajax, which is something we're not really used to saying, we're on the brink of a title coming into recent weeks. That has all changed with the results last weekend. Now, at the time of recording, this is before the midweek programme in the Eredivisie, with 2 games to go, there's 1 point just between the two teams. Ajax leading PSV by 1 point. So by the time you listen to this, Ajax might not even be top anymore. They might not even have that slim lead to defend because they were going to Groningen on Wednesday night. So we'll see how that pans out. I'm pretty confident that PSV will still be there or thereabouts. They were home to Heracles during the week. But look, this is absolutely huge, really, because Ajax thought they were on for getting that title back. At the time of recording, winless in the last 3, lost 2 of those, including the defeat to NEC Nijmegen last weekend, where they looked really, really nervous and then just absolutely collapsed in the final bit of that as PSV were coming back from 2 down to win at final. So Ajax went into the day thinking they were going to have a title party and ended up clinging on to the leadership by their fingernails. So yeah, it's turned from what was a procession for PSV to the title to a procession for Ajax for the title to a really amazing title race. The 3 stages of the title race in the Eredivisie are extraordinary. For that reason, I don't know if we're going to have time to do anything other than have some chips. Because honestly, nowhere does chips like the Netherlands, especially with mayonnaise. I think I'm stand to be corrected here, but the first place that I was aware of having mayonnaise on fries was the Netherlands. It changed my life. I used to get sent down, because I have Dutch godparents, I used to get sent down to the local shop by my godparents with a guilder, as it was then, to buy a massive bag of chips to supplement the dinner offering. And because I'd polished this like one sentence of Dutch so brilliantly, I'd get a bit of banter back and I'd be like, I'm like 8. I don't know any more Dutch. I'm stuck. Help! So hopefully Ajax won't be so unprepared this weekend.
I knew it was going to be chips, by the way. Lars, what's your recommendation for us?
Disappointed. Chips. I mean, like, can we just add? Can we just have like a
Not just any
stroopwafel
chips.
or
Yeah,
something? Just a little bit. Just have this. I'm a big believer in the stroopwafel. I think they're very nice because you can also
That's fair. That's fair.
if you have the right size coffee or tea mug, you can put it on top as your hot beverage is slightly too hot to drink. You can have the stroopwafel on top of there, and then the steam sort of warms it up and makes it a little bit moist. Like this is the way to. Of course,
he's
I'm
a
trying
pro,
not to eat
ladies and
things like that,
gentlemen.
but,
He's a pro.
You see,
it's just not good for the diet.
This is why we tune into you on Ask OTC, mate. You give us the proper recipe, how to eat it, how to cook it.
Well, I'm not going to give a very proper recipe now, but I'm going to give a very specific recipe. Like, we haven't talked a lot about Serie A this week, neither in the main show or a little bit of Como chat, but like Serie A have got a proper title race. They've got an honest to God title race. Inter are 1 point behind Napoli. Napoli have it all in their own hands, but they threw away 2 points against Genoa at the weekend. They may still mess it up. So I think it's not the most glamorous tie on offer, but I do think Parma-Napoli is you have to see if you can make time for that this weekend, just because it is a very, very tight and exciting title race that's happening, and we might get Scott McTominay, Scudetto winner. I want this to happen so much because this was one of those transfers that everyone, including me, didn't really think was a very good idea. But it's wonderful to see a player who's been an honest, hard worker throughout his career go abroad, go to a new country, try something completely different, be put in a completely different context, and sort of reinvent himself as this sort of Balak of the Highlands who keeps making these sort of great crashing runs into the box for Napoli. Who saw that coming? It's wonderful. So I'm really hoping we'll see Scott McTominay Scudetto hero, and for that to happen, we do need Napoli to beat Parma.
And that's on Sunday at 7:45, Parma versus Napoli. And Napoli unbeaten in their last 10 games since losing to Como in February. Interestingly enough, though, Parma have scored 4 goals in their last 5 matches, whereas Napoli have kept 17 clean sheets all season, and that's the most in Serie A. It does suggest that this will be a fascinating game, Lars. What are we going to eat with it, though?
I'm keeping it very basic because it's any time. I mean, okay, we are
Chips
playing
again.
away in Parma. No, this is the thing. We're playing away in Parma. So obviously that is an amazing food part of the world. Yes, and many other things. But it's Napoli. It's all about Napoli, this story. And Napoli is the home of pizza. So I want to see if you have a place nearby you that does a good, proper Neapolitan pizza. It has to be out of a stone oven. And just... A lot of people would subscribe to the idea that the margherita is the proper Neapolitan pizza, nothing too fancy. But I like the sort of Diavola variant, make it slightly spicy. So maybe have some salsiccia and just a hint of chili on there to give it a little bit of extra. And the juice from the salsiccia will sort of work really well with the cheese and so a pizza Diavola, but a proper Neapolitan pizza if you have a local place that does that.
I'm going for a calzone, but thank you very much.